The skies above Earth were quiet for a long time. For generations, people only remembered the stories of the Great War that nearly ended everything. Cities had been rebuilt, oceans had healed, and life had found a rhythm again. But there was still an empty space in every story, a promise that one day the lost supercarrier would return. No one really believed it anymore. It was something grandparents told their grandchildren before bed, a legend wrapped in regret and hope. Until that morning. It began with a flash over the Arctic horizon. Satellites blinked, sensors screamed, and deep space networks went dark for exactly 7 seconds. In those 7 seconds, every scanner on Earth caught the same image, a shape so massive it blocked out the upper atmosphere, surrounded by golden mist. At first, the analysts thought it was a solar flare. Then they saw the signature, human design, Earthborn, century-old, the impossible. Commander Mira Kadir was the first to see the raw data. Her eyes widened, her heart raced, and for a long second, she forgot to breathe. The ship code matched one of the lost carriers from the final war. Arc 1, she whispered. The room fell silent. Around her, officers stood frozen, the hum of monitors filling the air. Someone whispered, "It can't be real." Mira swallowed. "Get me a visual link." Across the sky, clouds swirled and broke apart. A shadow emerged, huge, metallic, silent. It moved like something alive but too heavy to belong to air. It descended through golden light, engines glowing faintly, heat waves bending the air beneath it. Snow from the polar caps melted in its wake. Civilians rushed out of homes, recording the event on trembling devices. Children pointed upward, their faces filled with awe. When the ship's hull came into focus, every symbol, every worn edge told a story of distance and time. The letters, Arc 1, were still etched along the side, faint but clear, glowing under the sun. Humanity's lost supercarrier, the one they had built as their final defense, the one that had disappeared beyond the stars, was coming home. In the Earth Command Center, voices overlapped in disbelief. "It's intact. The engines are still active. There's no damage that size should survive." Mira leaned forward. "Establish contact." A comms officer nodded and activated an encrypted channel. Static filled the air. For a moment, only the deep hum of the ship could be heard, echoing through the signal. Then, through the static, a voice, old, calm, and undeniably human. "Earth Command, this is Arc 1, requesting permission to land." The room erupted in sound. Some shouted, some laughed, some cried. Mira raised a hand for silence. "Arc 1, this is Earth Command. You are cleared for approach. Welcome home." Outside, the carrier moved gracefully, descending over the mountains. It cast a shadow that stretched for miles. Every camera on the planet turned toward it, and for the first time in centuries, humanity looked up, not in fear, but in pride. The ship lowered toward an old launch valley that had once sent thousands of vessels to the stars. Now grass and snow covered it, but the carrier descended as if it remembered the place. Mira watched the readings on her console. Engine steady, atmospheric balance holding. "It's adapting to modern air density," she muttered. One officer looked at her. "Commander, how could it still function after 100 years?" Mira smiled faintly. "Because humans built it to last." The ship stopped above the valley, hovering 100 meters off the ground. Then, as if exhaling after a long breath, it released a wave of heat and light. The snow melted in perfect circles beneath it. A hatch opened near the underbelly, and a ramp extended slowly, glowing orange in the cold air. People nearby stood frozen. Then figures appeared, silhouettes against the sun. 6 humans stepped out. Their suits were old but still gleamed under the daylight. Helmets off, their faces were pale, eyes adjusting to sunlight they hadn't seen in decades. The first one, a tall man with a scar down his cheek, looked at the sky and smiled softly. He turned toward the nearest camera drone and said in a steady voice, "To all of Earth, we have returned." The world stopped. Broadcast networks froze the frame and replayed it endlessly. Across continents, people shouted, cheered, wept. Humanity's lost ship and its crew had come back from the dead. But as celebrations began, a few scientists noticed something strange. Behind Ark 1, deep in the sky, there was a faint reflection, a shadow that moved when the carrier moved. Too small to be a cloud, too slow to be debris. Something was following it. In the command room, Mira's assistant frowned. "Commander, I have a secondary contact behind the carrier. No signal, no ID. It's cloaked, but not fully." Mira leaned forward again, her expression hardening. "Keep it quiet. Track it, don't alert anyone yet." Down in the valley, the returning crew of Ark 1 stood silently at the base of the ship. The air around them shimmered with warmth. They looked tired but peaceful. The captain raised his hand in a gesture of respect, speaking softly. "We carried Earth's name across the void. We found what we sought, and now we bring it home." Mira listened to the transmission, but something in his tone made her uneasy. There was pride in his voice, but also sadness. She watched the unidentified signal on her screen drawing closer, barely visible like a shadow stretching behind a flame. The lost supercarrier had returned, but it hadn't come back alone. The massive carrier floated above the frozen valley like a silent monument. Its shadow stretched for miles, painting the ground in darkness even under the bright polar sun. The air trembled with quiet power. People gathered at safe distances, still unable to believe that the legend had become real. But for Commander Mira Kadir, the wonder was quickly fading into unease. Her screens flashed with data she could not explain. Energy readings beyond human capability, small fluctuations in gravity, and most troubling of all, that faint echo on radar that refused to go away. Something was following the ship, something that wasn't supposed to exist. She stood beside her console and took a slow breath. "Keep tracking that shadow," she ordered. "No active scans. If it's hostile, I want to see its move before it sees ours." The officers nodded, their faces pale under the white lights. Mira's heart pounded, not from fear but from the heavy knowledge that history was repeating itself. The same kind of unknown that once destroyed Earth's fleets had returned, with their greatest ship leading the way. Out in the open, the landing ramp of Ark 1 glowed softly. From its edge, Captain Reyes gazed across the valley. His expression was calm, yet his eyes told a story of exhaustion and pain. A century of silence had weighed on him and his crew. They had left as soldiers, but they returned as something else, messengers carrying both light and warning. Behind him, his crew moved slowly, their steps uncertain, as if they were walking on a world they no longer knew. The wind howled, lifting snow around their boots. Reyes reached for his wrist panel, touched a control, and a beam of blue light shot from the ship's hull into the ground. The earth shook. Old concrete cracked open, revealing an enormous metallic surface hidden beneath years of ice and soil. It wasn't just a landing platform, it was a sealed chamber, ancient and untouched. Reyes looked up toward the hovering drones and cameras broadcasting the moment live. "We return not only with what we lost," he said, his voice steady, "but with what we found." Inside the Earth Command bunker, Mira froze. The seismic monitors spiked. "What are they doing?" her assistant asked. Mira didn't answer. She already knew. The ship wasn't just landing, it was waking something beneath the surface, something even older than the carrier itself. "Get me a link to Captain Reyes," she ordered. "Now!" The connection buzzed alive. His face appeared on the main screen, half lit by the blue light rising from the ground. "Captain," Mira said, keeping her tone sharp but respectful. "You're breaching restricted ground. What's below that site?" Reyes smiled faintly. "Commander, what you call restricted was once our home base. This valley was where Ark 1 was born. What's below is what we left behind to guard you." The blue light expanded into a circular pattern, marking symbols that no one in the room recognized. It wasn't a weapon signature. It was a code. The bunker filled with murmurs as data streamed across every terminal. "That language, human but modified," said one of the analysts. It's It's like a message to Earth itself. Mira leaned closer to the display. Translate what you can, fast. The machine worked for minutes, decoding the sequence. Then words appeared, glowing faintly on her screen. The Ark remembers its maker. Earth endures because it must. Open the way for redemption. Before Mira could respond, the ground under the ship rumbled again. From beneath the ice, mechanical pillars rose slowly, glowing with golden veins of energy. They aligned perfectly with the carrier's hull, locking in place. Energy began to flow between them, a silent exchange of power. The carrier wasn't just docking. It was recharging something buried deep under the valley. "What are you awakening, Reyes?" Mira demanded. He looked at her through the feed, calm as ever. "Not awakening," he said. "Restoring." His voice softened. "You've lived through peace, Commander. You've rebuilt what we once lost. But peace without strength is only waiting for the next fall. We carried your defense with us across the stars. Now we bring it back." Outside, the sky dimmed slightly as energy surged from the carrier. The air shimmered with waves of gold and white. Across continents, people saw it. Streams of light rising from the poles, forming patterns like ancient constellations. The global networks trembled under the sudden power burst. Mira's team scrambled to stabilize the grid. "All systems spiking. Command circuits flickering," shouted one of the engineers. Mira clenched her fists. "Cut the relay. If they're overriding our systems, I want control back." "It's too late," the engineer said quietly. "They're linking directly through the planetary shield network. They have access to everything." Mira stared at the live feed. Captain Reyes and his crew stood in silence as the valley floor pulsed with light. A deep hum filled the air. Slowly she began to understand. This wasn't an invasion or a malfunction. It was synchronization. The ship had been designed as part of something larger, something Earth itself had forgotten. The old systems reconnected, forming a grid that spanned from orbit to core. Earth's defensive satellites turned to face outward again for the first time in centuries. Deep under the oceans, dormant reactors began to glow. The planet's heart had started beating with its old rhythm. Yet that shadow on the radar still lingered. It moved closer, matching the carrier's altitude. Mira's assistant spoke softly. "Commander, unidentified object closing distance. Velocity, stable. Range, 20 kilometers. Mira activated her personal channel to Reyes. "Captain, you have a tail. Unknown vessel approaching your position." Reyes's eyes darkened. "We expected this." He turned to his crew. "Shields to full. Defensive grid online." From the edge of the atmosphere, the small craft emerged into sight, sleek, black, and silent, unlike any known alien or human design. It slowed as it neared the carrier as if it were observing. Then a thin beam of blue light flickered between the two ships. The shadow wasn't attacking. It was scanning. Mira's voice was firm. "Do you know what that is?" Reyes nodded slowly. "We call them the Watchers. They found us in deep space. They learned from us. And they followed." His gaze lifted toward the sky. "They don't speak. They record. And now they've come to see if we're worthy to return." The Watcher's beam intensified, passing over the carrier, touching every hull plate, every mark of age. Then just as suddenly it vanished. The small ship turned and began to rise, disappearing into the upper atmosphere like mist. Reyes lowered his head. "They've seen enough." Mira waited. "What does that mean, Captain?" "It means," he said softly, "they know Earth still stands. And that's all they ever needed to know." The valley fell quiet. The ship's engines powered down to a soft hum. The light beneath the ground dimmed. For now the danger had passed, but something larger had begun. The Ark had returned home, and with it the galaxy's attention. Snow clouds rolled over the northern horizon as the sun dipped low, throwing long golden beams across the valley where Ark 1 rested. Steam rose from its glowing hull as engineers and soldiers gathered around its perimeter, keeping a respectful distance from the enormous machine. Humanity's lost supercarrier had returned, but the feeling in the air was not celebration. It was tension. Too much mystery surrounded its journey, and no one knew what the ship truly carried within. Commander Mira Kadir stood near the observation deck, her gaze fixed on the gigantic ship. The valley floor still shimmered faintly from the energy it had released earlier. Every reading her analysts brought her contradicted the known limits of human science. It's producing power levels higher than any reactor we've ever built, one of them reported quietly. Almost like it's drawing from the planet itself. Mira nodded but said nothing. Her mind was still on the radar shadow that had vanished hours ago. Something had followed the ship across light years, and that thought wouldn't leave her alone. On board Ark 1, Captain Reyes walked through the silent corridors. His boots echoed against metal floors that still bore scars of ancient battles. The lights flickered with each pulse of the ship's heart. He passed his crew, men and women who had spent decades in cryostasis. Their bodies aged, but their minds still sharp. Some of them murmured softly as they worked at the control stations. They had seen things in deep space no one on Earth could imagine. Some even doubted if they were still fully human after what they had endured. "Captain," a woman called from the command chair. "Atmospheric filters show stable. External drones deployed. No visible threats." Reyes nodded. "Maintain watch. Earth isn't ready to know everything we brought back." He looked at the holographic screen showing a projection of the planet. The blue oceans shimmered peacefully, unaware that the galaxy's silence was about to end. "Home," he whispered. "So fragile. So unready." Mira's voice crackled through the intercom. "Ark 1, this is Earth Command. We request a full systems report. Your re-entry damaged half our satellite network. We need to understand what you're running." Reyes hesitated. "Commander, our systems aren't conventional anymore. During the years we were lost, we encountered technology, human in origin, but evolved. We had to adapt it to survive." "Adapt it how?" Mira asked sharply. "We found a human colony," he replied, "older than your recorded history. They called themselves the First Exodus. They left before the Great War, before you even built the Ark fleet. They survived on the edge of the galaxy, hiding from something that hunts civilizations once they reach a certain stage. They taught us how to vanish, how to rebuild, and how to return when the time was right." The line went silent. Mira felt her stomach twist. "And now the time is right?" "Yes," Reyes said softly. "Because they found us again." At that moment, an alarm blared through Earth Command. The radar screen filled with signals. 3, then 6, then 12 objects entering the atmosphere at near light velocity. Mira froze. "Captain, we have inbound contacts, no identification, no communication." Reyes turned toward the viewport. Outside, the night sky lit up with streaks of white fire as the objects pierced the atmosphere. "Those aren't enemies," he said calmly. "They're warnings." The streaks slowed, stabilizing above the carrier like stars hanging too low. Each one shimmered with blue energy before spreading into perfect formation. They weren't ships, they were probes. Thin metallic spheres humming with power, scanning the carrier and the ground beneath it. "What are they?" Mira demanded. Reyes stared at them, his face unreadable. "The Watchers," he said. "The same ones that followed us home. They observe every world that tries to rise again. If they decide we're too dangerous, they erase us." Mira's pulse quickened. "Erase? You mean they don't invade?" Reyes interrupted. "They remove, quietly, no survivors, no debris. Just absence." The probes pulsed once in unison. A ripple of blue light spread across the valley, knocking out every electronic device. Lights flickered out, screens went black, and even the sound of the wind seemed to vanish. The people who had gathered began to panic. Mira grabbed the emergency handset, shouting, "All civilians, fall back! Secure positions now." Inside Ark 1, Reyes raised his hand to a console and pressed a single control. The ship responded instantly. Dozens of panels unfolded from its hull, releasing a white gold field that expanded like a living curtain. The energy wave stopped in midair, frozen against the invisible barrier. The probes pulsed again, stronger this time, but the barrier held. Mira's voice returned through static. "Captain, what are you doing?" "Protecting you," Reyes said. "This ship carries the last legacy of the First Exodus, the Redemption Core. It's more than a reactor. It's a shield against extinction." The barrier shimmered, and slowly the probes began to withdraw, their blue lights fading one by one until the sky was clear again. For the first time in hours, the valley fell into silence. Snow began to fall once more, thin and soft, as if nothing had happened. Mira exhaled shakily. "They're gone," she said, disbelief in her tone. "You scared them off?" Reyes shook his head. "No, they've seen what they wanted. They'll return, but next time they won't come to observe." "Then what are we supposed to do?" she asked quietly. He looked at the screen showing Earth's map glowing faintly beneath the ship. "Prepare," he said, "because the galaxy has remembered you. Far above, in the dark reaches of orbit, one last probe lingered unseen. It turned its lens toward the carrier and sent a single pulse of data into the void. The signal spread outward faster than light, carrying with it one message across the stars. Earth has awakened. And somewhere, far beyond human space, something answered. The next day began under a silver sky. Thin sunlight filtered through clouds as a cold wind swept across the valley. The colossal supercarrier Ark-1 remained motionless, its hull gleaming faintly with energy. News had spread across every continent. Humanity's lost warship had returned, and it had done so carrying technology far beyond anything Earth understood. Governments, scientists, and soldiers had all rushed to the site, but Commander Mira Kadir kept control. No one approached the ship without her command. She hadn't slept. Her mind replayed the sight of those probes, the Watchers, scanning the world as if judging its worth. They were gone, but she felt the weight of their gaze still lingering in the air. "Status on the ship?" she asked quietly. "Stable," replied her chief officer, Sato. "Energy readings are lower, but internal activity continues." "It's like it's breathing." Mira stared at the screen. The carrier's heartbeat echoed across every frequency. "And Captain Reyes? He hasn't responded to our last 3 calls." Mira clenched her jaw. "Then we go to him." Outside, armored transports rolled across the icy ground toward the ship. Engineers followed, carrying scanners and drones. The ramp of Ark-1 was open, a dark wound glowing with amber light. The air shimmered as they approached, filled with low hums that vibrated in the bones. When Mira stepped inside, the first thing she noticed was silence. Thick, alive silence. The interior walls seemed to move slightly, pulsing with soft light as if the ship were listening. "Captain Reyes," she called. Her voice echoed down the corridor. After a few seconds, footsteps approached. Reyes appeared at the far end, his uniform coated in frost and his expression calm. Almost too calm. "Commander," he said, inclining his head. "You should have waited for clearance." "I waited long enough," Mira replied. "You vanished for a century, brought back a ship that rewrites physics and nearly shut down our planet. I think I deserve answers." Reyes regarded her for a long moment, then gestured for her to follow. They walked through the long metallic passageway lined with strange panels etched in geometric symbols. "When we left," he began, "we carried humanity's last hope, a weapon meant to end the war that consumed us. But what we found out there changed everything." "What did you find?" "Not an enemy," he said softly. "A mirror. A civilization that looked like us but wasn't. They called themselves the First Exodus, the humans who left Earth thousands of years before the Great War. They evolved faster, reached the edge of understanding, and then stopped. Something forced them to hide. Something that punishes growth," Mira frowned. "The Watchers," Reyes nodded. "They exist to erase civilizations that reach a certain level of power. The First Exodus built the Redemption Corps to protect themselves. When they couldn't win, they hid the technology in our ship and sent us home. They knew we'd need it. They stepped into a vast chamber filled with light. At the center stood a tall crystal structure, pulsing with golden veins." Mira's eyes widened. "Is that it?" Reyes smiled faintly. "The heart of Ark-1, the Redemption Corps. It can bend energy, matter, even time in small ways. It learns from emotion, from intent. It's not just power, it's conscience." Mira took a slow step forward. "And you're saying this thing can defend Earth?" "If guided correctly," Reyes said. "But if it senses fear or anger, it reacts unpredictably. The core mirrors the heart of its keeper." As if to answer, the golden light flickered gently in rhythm with Mira's heartbeat. She felt warmth in her chest, a strange connection forming between her and the core. Then, just as suddenly, the warmth turned to cold. An alarm echoed across the chamber. Reyes turned sharply. "They're back." Outside, the sky darkened. Through the valley clouds, shapes began to descend. Sleek, triangular vessels gliding silently through the upper atmosphere. Hundreds of them. The Watchers had returned. Mira activated her comlink. "All ground units, defensive positions. Get civilians out of range." From the carrier's outer decks, old weapons hummed to life. Massive railguns, point defense cannons, and energy shields that glowed with soft light. The ancient ship stirred like a sleeping giant waking from a dream. Reyes looked at Mira. "They won't attack first. They test resolve. If we hesitate, they'll decide we're unworthy." "So what do we do?" she asked. We show them we're not afraid. He touched a control panel and the core responded instantly. The ship's lights blazed bright white, filling the sky with radiance. A beam of light shot upward, passing through clouds into orbit. The Watcher fleet shifted position but did not fire. The energy beam expanded, drawing a glowing circle across the sky, a symbol so vast it could be seen from every corner of the planet. It was the insignia of Earth's first fleet, the mark of humanity's unity. From cities, deserts, and mountains, people looked up and cheered. The fear began to fade. For the first time in living memory, humanity saw not darkness in the sky, but light. The Watchers hovered motionless. Then, one by one, they began to withdraw. The last of them tilted slightly, almost like a bow, before vanishing into the void. Silence returned. Mira exhaled slowly, her hands trembling. "Did we just win?" Reyes smiled faintly. "No, we just reminded them who we are." She turned to him, her voice softer now. "And what happens next?" He looked toward the glowing core. "Now we prepare for what made them afraid of us in the first place." Far above, beyond the limits of sight, something vast stirred among the stars. The Watchers had not left in defeat. They had left to warn their masters. And those masters were waking. Dawn broke cold and pale over the valley. The great ship Ark 1 stood like a monument of light and metal, its vast hull glimmering softly in the thin morning sun. The night before had changed everything. The Watchers had come, tested Earth's resolve, and then vanished into the stars. Humanity had survived its first contact with the unknown. But there was no celebration. Only the quiet hum of unease that came after surviving something you didn't yet understand. Commander Mira Kadir stood on a raised platform at the edge of the landing field. The air smelled faintly of ozone and steel. Below her, repair drones crawled across the ship's skin, sealing fractures from the re-entry. Around her, communication towers flickered with renewed life as Earth Command tried to restore systems that had collapsed under Ark 1's energy surge. Yet her thoughts weren't on the ship or the damage. They were on Captain Reyes and what he had said about what comes next. "Commander," Sato called from behind her. "We've intercepted a signal from the outer orbit relays. It's faint, not Watcher tech, different frequency." Mira turned. "Show me." A hollow projection flickered to life. The signal was rhythmic, not mechanical. It pulsed with patterns, almost like speech. "Translate?" she asked. "Working on it," Sato said. "It's old. Pre-war coding, maybe even older." She frowned. "Route it through the Ark. Its systems might recognize it." Minutes later, in the heart of the supercarrier, Captain Reyes studied the projection. The pattern glowed across his console, soft blue on black metal. He recognized it instantly. "It's a beacon," he said quietly. "The kind we used when we were lost." Mira's voice came over the link. "From where?" Reyes looked up. "Not from space. From Earth." A heavy silence filled both ends of the transmission. Within hours, drones pinpointed the signal's origin. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, buried near the ruins of an old undersea station that predates the war. The data was faint but deliberate, a pulse repeating the same three words: "Return the core." Mira's brow tightened. "Return it where?" Reyes didn't answer right away. He was staring at the ship's glowing heart, the redemption core, suspended in its chamber like a living sun. "They're calling it back," he murmured. "Whoever left that message knew it would return here someday." "Captain," Mira said carefully, "we just stabilized the planet's defense grid. We're not moving that thing anywhere until we understand what it is." Reyes met her gaze through the hologram. "Commander, it isn't just a reactor. The core isn't from the first Exodus, it's older. It predates humanity itself." Mira froze. "That's not possible." He shook his head. "When the first Exodus found it, it was already functioning. They didn't build it, they inherited it. They called it the Light of Origin." For a long time, Mira didn't speak. The hum of machines filled the silence. Then she said quietly, "If that's true, then whoever built it might still be out there." Reyes nodded. "Exactly." That night, the sea began to glow. Across the Pacific, satellites captured rings of light spiraling upward from the ocean floor. They weren't explosions, but controlled pulses, like the ones that had once awakened Ark 1's cradle under the ice. The same pattern, the same design. In the command center, alarms blared. Mira stared at the live feed in disbelief. It's reacting to the core. Reyes appeared beside her through a projection. They've called it home. The ocean is opening a gate. A massive whirlpool formed in the heart of the glowing sea. Lightning crackled through clouds, and the waves began to twist into impossible shapes. Out of the storm rose a tower of pure light, taller than any structure on Earth. It shimmered like crystal and metal, half solid, half energy. Crowds across the world watched the phenomenon through broadcasts. To some, it looked divine. To others, it looked like the beginning of something they couldn't stop. Reyes turned to his crew. "Prepare the ship. We're taking the core to the source," Mira snapped. "That's suicide. We don't even know what's waiting down there." He looked at her calmly. "Commander, we can't ignore the call. If the core was meant to protect humanity, then its creators must have known this day would come. We have to trust it." The Ark's engines roared to life. The ground shook as the ship lifted slowly, its hull blazing gold in the stormlight. Snow and dust spiraled beneath it as it rose toward the ocean. Mira followed in a smaller escort craft, unwilling to let history unfold without her. As they crossed the clouds, she could see the storm growing larger, the light tower piercing through the clouds like a blade into heaven. When the Ark reached the center of the vortex, the redemption core began to pulse violently. Lightning wrapped around the ship in golden arcs. Reyes placed his hand on the control panel, his voice steady. "It's responding to proximity. It recognizes the signal." "Captain," Mira shouted through the comms, "if this thing destabilizes," he interrupted softly, "then we'll finally know if it was meant to save us or test us." The ship descended into the heart of the light. The sea swallowed everything in a blinding flash. For a moment, every screen on Earth went black. Then one by one, they lit again. Where the storm had been, the ocean was calm. The tower of light was gone. So was the Ark. Mira's escort hovered above the waves, her heart pounding as she stared at the empty sea. The world below looked unchanged, yet she could feel something new in the air. A faint hum in the atmosphere, like the planet itself had started breathing differently. Then, from the dark sky above, a single transmission echoed through every open frequency. It was Captain Reyes's voice, soft but clear. "Earth Command, this is Ark 1. The gate is open. We found where it all began. Prepare them for what's coming." The signal faded, leaving behind only the whisper of the waves. Mira looked out across the endless water, her eyes wet with cold wind and fear. Humanity had found redemption, but now it was standing at the doorway to something much greater. The sea was calm, too calm. Waves moved like breathing glass beneath the dim blue sky, as if the ocean itself was holding its breath. Hours had passed since Ark 1 vanished into the storm, swallowed by the gate of light. Every ship and satellite that tried to scan the region failed. There was no reflection, no signal, not even energy residue. It was as though the massive supercarrier had never existed. Commander Mira Kadir stood on the deck of her escort craft, staring at the horizon. The world was silent except for the soft hum of wind through the steel hull. "Any new signal?" she asked. Sato, standing beside her, shook his head. "Nothing. The core's frequency is gone. The ocean's magnetic field has stabilized." Mira clenched her jaw. "That's impossible. That ship carried enough power to light the planet. It can't just vanish." Sato hesitated. "Commander, maybe it didn't vanish. Maybe it crossed over." She turned toward him. "Crossed where?" He didn't answer. Neither of them really knew. Far beneath the surface, beyond light and time, Ark 1 drifted through a tunnel of radiance. The ship's hull vibrated with soft harmonics as if the metal itself was singing. Captain Reyes stood at the bridge, his face illuminated by golden light. Around him, his crew watched in stunned silence as streaks of stars and continents flickered around them like memories. "We're not in hyperspace," his navigator whispered. "This feels alive," Reyes nodded slowly. "The core opened something older than any map. We're inside the heart of the signal." Outside the viewports, the tunnel began to widen. The ship burst into open space, but not the space they knew. The stars here were arranged in perfect spirals, glowing white and blue, forming a vast construct like a cathedral built out of galaxies. The crew gasped. A massive ring floated ahead, rotating slowly, carved from silver light. In its center pulsed a single star-shaped object, radiating energy identical to the redemption core. Reyes whispered, "The source." The ship slowed automatically, guided by invisible forces. As it approached, fragments of data streamed into the ship's systems. The screens filled with ancient human text, symbols and patterns that matched early Earth languages long forgotten. "Can you translate it?" Reyes asked. The AI's calm voice replied, "Translation possible. Message reads, 'We are the architects. We began here. We end here. All who return carry the seed of the beginning.'" Reyes frowned. "Architects? They were human." "Not exactly," the AI answered. "But they made humanity, or guided it." The words sank deep into him. Humanity wasn't alone and perhaps never had been. They were part of something far older, something that had shaped evolution and then vanished into myth. A voice suddenly echoed through the bridge, not through speakers but directly inside their minds. "Children of Earth, you've come far." Every crew member froze. The voice was neither male nor female, calm yet immense, as if the stars themselves were speaking. "You carry what we left behind. The Corps has chosen you as it once chose others, but it is not yours to keep. It belongs to all who remember the light." Reyes stepped forward, trying to stay calm. "Who are you? Why did you make this?" The voice answered gently. "Because the galaxy forgets. Every age, every species, every empire rises, conquers, and falls. We gave each a chance to build something greater, to learn that power means nothing without mercy. Most failed. Will you?" Reyes looked at his crew, then at the core pulsing at the ship's heart. "Humanity rebuilt itself from ashes," he said quietly. "We fought, we lost, and we learned. If this test is about worth, then let the light decide." The core began to glow brighter, flooding the chamber with golden light. The ship trembled as if caught in a current. Mira's face flickered across the bridge screen, her voice distant and fading. "Reyes, we're detecting massive energy surges. What are you doing?" "Finishing what we started," Reyes replied. The core expanded outward, dissolving into radiant waves that passed through every hull plate, every circuit, every person aboard. Memories filled their minds. Images of the first exodus, the architects, the rise and fall of worlds beyond number. Humanity's story was only one thread in a tapestry too large to grasp. Then, as suddenly as it began, the light collapsed inward. On Earth, the ocean exploded in a pillar of gold that reached the clouds. The waters roared, then calmed, leaving a vast, glowing symbol burned into the waves, a spiral, the same design seen around the architect's ring. Mira stared at it from the command ship, shielding her eyes from the brilliance. "He did it," she whispered. "He found them." Moments later, the communication array crackled. A voice came through, faint, distorted, but human. "This is Arc 1. We've seen the beginning. The architects are real. They left us the light to protect, not to own. Tell Earth. The test has begun." The signal faded. Across the planet, strange phenomena began. The core's energy, now embedded in the atmosphere, awakened dormant satellites and powered ancient machines buried in forgotten ruins. Lights flickered across deserts and mountaintops. From orbit, Earth looked different. Veins of gold traced across its continents like a living network. Mira stood at the viewport, awestruck and terrified. Humanity had just been elevated to something greater, or cursed with knowledge it wasn't ready for. As night fell, she looked up at the stars and whispered, "Captain, whatever you've done, I hope you were right." Far beyond sight, Arc 1 drifted in silence, its hull reflecting the light of countless galaxies. Inside, Captain Reyes gazed at the fading glow of the architect's world and said softly to himself, "Redemption isn't a gift. It's a choice." And with that, the ship turned toward the distant spiral arm of home, carrying the light of the beginning and the weight of everything that came before.